Hi everybody, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Ancient Wisdom. I'm Vicky Combs, and as promised, in episode number 1 of this 4-part series in the channel's launch, the subject for today is the wounded healer. And the topic, or the title, Physician, Heal Thyself, is really appropriate to not just my personal situation, but to what so many people are going through as we distinguish between what are ascension symptoms versus illness. But before we dive into it, I want to do a little bit of whining. I understand why they say you cannot launch a new channel with one video, that you have to create at least 4 to let the YouTube algorithm figure out who your audience is and to make sure that you're not part of that AI-generated crap that is poisoning. It's flooding YouTube right now and really poisoning it. So I get that. But because this is being recorded on April 14th, and the channel doesn't launch until the Aries new moon on April 17th, I have no way to read your comments and to interact with you. So it makes it really hard. At least it's hard for me. Because one of the purposes of the channel is not just to share our collective spiritual wisdom and experiences, but to build community. Well, you can't do that if I can't read and comment on your comments. So I'm looking forward to when the channel launches and we can actually begin interacting. So now, with that whining done, let's dive into the actual topic. So as I explained in the first episode, the reason that this is being timed now is because my Andromedan guides said it was the proper time. I was to share this healing gift that had been downloaded by Zazar from the Andromedans at the retreat held on the Lion's Gate, the collaboration between Alcazar from the Stargate experience and Zazar from the Evolutionary Sanctuary in upstate New York, where Marilyn Gawaki channels Zazar. And as I explained in the prior video about resources, what we were given was a light technology, an orb that each of us would interact with differently. We were each instructed to begin to work with this consciousness, this new gift that the Andromedans had given and Zazar had channeled and brought through. We were to each work with it and figure out how we would be called to interact and use it for the upliftment of humanity, for healing, and for the ascension process. So what happened for me, because it's been now, close to 9 months since that retreat, I have been working daily with my orb, my timeline shifting orb, and what I was shown was that when I combined the light from the orb with vocalizations that I have been channeling and that have been coming through, it would enable there to be a timeline shift into a timeline where either the illness never existed because the disruption in the energy body didn't exist, or a new timeline, a different timeline in which the illness no longer existed. So that is what I've been called to share. And if you're called to watch the fourth and final video of this launch series, then you will be able to participate in the healing ceremony that I will do. And this is a pretty, in some ways, scary thing to do, because I have lived and worked in a fairly mainstream situation, working for 20 plus years as a hospice chaplain. And now I'm being asked by Spirit to download vocalizations through my very damaged throat from these 12 plus years of mercury poisoning. I'm being asked to trust that this healing can happen, that what Zazar and my Andromedan guides have promised is true. I'm being asked to trust that and to share that with you in the fourth and final video. And so, if you're with me and we co-create that ritual together on this YouTube channel, it will be a life-changing experience for me, simply because it requires so much courage to step from a mainstream ministry in hospice, working for some of the biggest hospice companies in the country, to something so very, very different. So, that'll be for episode 4. But for this episode, the conversation is about the difference between ascension symptoms, or what's being called ascension symptoms, versus actual illness. And as you know, in the first 2 episodes, we discussed the fact that our solar system is traveling through an area of the galaxy, an area of the cosmos, where our planet is being showered not just with all of the additional light rays from our own sun. And if you watch Stefan Burns or any of the others who document this, you'll know what I mean. We are being showered with all of this new energy, solar energy, cosmic energy, whatever were the long-term effects of 3-eyed Atlas when it passed through. And so it's reasonable, completely reasonable to expect and understand that our carbon-based bodies are being asked to go through a lot and adjust to a lot. And if you listen to any of the off-world entities that I mentioned in the prior video about resources, or any of the astrologers or psychics who have spoken about this, then you know what I mean. We are and shouldn't be surprised by changes in our sleeping patterns, changes in our eating patterns, changes in just how much energy we have, changes in our ability to cope with stress. And that is a big one, given the chaos of the world right now and the amount of fear. So it's not surprising if we're feeling what in the past we might have interpreted as illness. That shouldn't be surprising to anyone. A lot is being asked of our bodies. So there's that. And then there's the more, how shall I say, traditional, mainstream understandings of illness. Cancer, any of the illnesses that we identify with, liver disease, any of the things that can happen to our body. Then there are those. And in my case, and part of the reason that it is so difficult for me to talk is something like what I experienced. Mercury poisoning from dental work that went wrong. So I have been dealing for this past 12 to 14 years with the consequences of that. And this is where the ancient wisdom of our shamans, who have always taught for thousands and thousands of years that any physical illness is simply a manifestation of a disruption in the energy body. Sometimes that's caused by trauma. For example, childhood sexual abuse, or the loss as an adult of a loved one in death. It can even be caused by divorce or some other major loss. Out here in California, where we have the wildfires, people dealing with the consequences of having their home burnt to the ground, and all of the losses that come with that kind of environmental catastrophe. So we have that, and those kind of disruptions in the energy body can later manifest in physical illness. The shamans have been telling us that for years, thousands of years. So that's not news to anyone. The question is, how do we deal with that? Knowing that the physical manifestation of an illness could begin with a trauma and the associated stress of it from either recent or distant time periods. To know that in one's head is different than coping with it in one's heart. As one of the grandmothers said, the most difficult and longest journey we'll ever make is that 16 inches from our head to our heart, where something that is simply an idea we accept, and being able to cope with it in our heart. But as we know from the work of Joe Dispenza and the Heart Math Institute, the real core, and Greg Braden, another person who teaches and talks about this a lot, the core of our power comes from the heart and travels to the brain. So for years, as I've been dealing with the mercury poisoning and been so very close to death myself, I kept asking myself, what am I doing wrong? If I know the wisdom of the shamans, what is it that I haven't yet learned? All of these things that we bring into our lives, as Bashar and the other great teachers instruct us. We create our reality. And so at some level, some part of my oversoul must have thought this was a good idea and that I needed to go through this. Well, I haven't figured it out yet, and perhaps you've gone through the same thing. And that's why I cannot wait to read your comments and respond to them so we can share our collective wisdom, our experiences of coping with what our bodies are going through. So when I hear the biblical phrase, physician, heal thyself, needless to say, I feel a great responsibility to myself to say, yes, Vicky, that's exactly right. Heal thyself. Go into this new healing technique that you have been given from your Andromedan soul family. Last August 7th, 2025, when this ritual was conducted, this meditation, take that great gift and use it and trust that what you have been shown will manifest. So it's as though Spirit has thrown down the gauntlet in front of me and said, yes, accept this. We are bringing you the healing that you have been waiting for. You simply need to accept it. So that's where I am at this time. And I am looking forward to hearing where you are. And I want to go back to one of the beautiful lessons that I learned in my 20 years working as a hospice chaplain and how the trauma can manifest. It was so common for me to have a patient approaching end of life. And as I listened to this one man's story and asked about when was the onset of his cancer, he gave me a date, and I said, well, and his wife was in the room at the time, so I was speaking to the two of them, and he said, I asked, when was the onset of the cancer? And he told me a date. And I said, well, what was going on at that time? And it was when their son died. He was hit by a train. And the mother always believed that it was not an accident. And the trauma of that child's death was the instigator of the physical illness. And that was something that I heard over and over again in those 20 years. And so I just mention that to you as a way to distinguish between the onset of a physical illness versus ascension symptoms. We are, those of us on a conscious path, spiritual path, who are looking forward to and embracing the idea of this journey from the 3D to the 5th D. And Bashar teaches that actually we currently live in a 4th dimensional reality because of time, because we live in our current reality in time. Although, as we all know, Einstein said that was an illusion too. Nonetheless, in our current space-time continuum, we do deal with it. So, I'm looking forward to reading your comments and being able to interact with you once the channel launches, and to learn from your experiences, to learn from not just your spiritual resources that we discussed in episode 2, but to learn what is the wisdom you have gained about what's happening in our bodies as we move from a 3D carbon-based reality to one of being homo luminous, where we are becoming more crystalline in our existence, and all that that entails, all the changes in thinking, in understanding the relationship between physical health and quantum mechanics. We know from the work of Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden and all of those who are working on teaching us, the Heart Math Institute, all of that work of teaching us to retrain our brain so that we open up from this very limited understanding of how the body works, what health even is, to what it's becoming as we and the earth go through the ascension process. So I look forward to discussing all of this with you in the comments section. I look forward to when I get the opportunity to create an online community. I refer you again always to my website, theancientwisdom.net, where all of my updates and offerings can be found. And then I invite you to join with me in the 4th and final episode of this 4-part series in launching the new YouTube channel. I look forward to co-creating that ritual with you. Thank you for joining me, and blessings to you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.